I am happy to present to you another brilliant TMS talk from the conversation that took place between physicians Howard Schubiner and Rangan Chattergee on the Feel Better, Live More podcast. Is your chronic pain actually mind-body pain? This talk helped me to consider that I was unaware that what I had been experiencing for almost 15 years could indeed be considered chronic pain. What started out as back pain at the early age of 15 years old then came, went, and mutated in the forms of more back pain, knee pain thought to have been stemming from an early acute hockey injury, foot pain or plantar fasciitis that was blamed on running, shoulder pain in the form of quote-unquote frozen shoulder, and eventually every pelvic pain symptom you can imagine. I had officially met all the requirements for what could be considered quote-unquote chronic pain. But because it shifted, came, and went, I never considered that I actually might have chronic pain. And I certainly didn't know that these were mind-body symptoms being caused by trauma and repressed emotions. The type of information provided in this talk has changed everything. One by one, these symptoms have dropped away as I have integrated this knowledge and healed spiritually and emotionally. I am pleased to say that I can now do any physical activity I want with no pain. This is about as close to a miracle as you can get. I imagine that I am not alone in that when I first learned these truths, I was very frustrated and, to be honest, pissed off at doctors and the medical system for their inability to help me. Aside from giving me the energy needed to walk away from the traditional medical system, this resentment cannot serve me. This talk gives me compassion for the predicament of the doctors. Clearly, they are not taught this information and are not given the proper tools in their training. It also shows me that there are doctors out there like Schubiner and Chattergee who are interested in helping their patients at all costs, even if it means turning the traditional medical model on its head. I want to express my immense gratitude and say thank you. You guys are amazing. Satya, Mind, Body, Spirit, Health, and Healing.
When you use the term chronic pain, are you able to list some of those conditions that fall under that umbrella term? And I've got a reason for asking this. You've mentioned headaches already, but if you could just sort of go down a common list, because I think this conversation and what we're talking about is relevant to almost everyone, whether in their own lives or someone very close to them. And I wonder if you might just make it super, super clear for us who we're referring to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, chronic pain just means any pain that's lasted for, they say 3 months or 6 months as the definition. But the conditions that are commonly what I would call neural circuit-based pain, in other words, brain-generated pain in the absence of structural problem, are primary headaches like tension and migraine headaches, and other headache conditions like occipital neuralgia, trigeminal neuralgia. Most people with TMJ problems do not actually, you can find that there's problems on the x-ray, but actually when you talk to them and take their history and take time, and we can talk about how we do that, how we assess people to know for sure. TMJ pain most of the time is neural circuit based or mind-body type pain. If you take people with costochondritis, chronic chest pain, again in the absence of heart disease or lung disease, most people with, the vast majority of people with irritable bowel syndrome and what's called non-ulcerative dyspepsia is the word I'm looking for. If you take people with chronic pelvic pain, they may be diagnosed as having pudendal neuralgia or pelvic floor dysfunction or vulvodynia. But all those things are just names. They're just describing that you have chronic pain.
Fibromyalgia?
Fibromyalgia, absolutely. And we did a study on chronic neck and back pain, and we haven't published it yet. But a colleague I have in the States examined 220 consecutive patients coming into his clinic with chronic neck and back pain. He's a physiatrist, physical medicine physician. And he determined that 88% of them had non-structural pain. I mean, that is shocking. Because if you go to a doctor with chronic neck or back pain or a chiropractor or or a massage therapist or a physical therapist, they're going to say, oh, well, you have degenerative disc disease. Look, it's on the x-ray or the MRI. You have got bulging discs. But everyone has those. And if you look closely at the data, we can share this data with you and your listeners.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people have those things on x-ray, as I do in my neck, without pain at all. And so we have to be very clear and very careful what we're talking about. And everyone needs a very careful evaluation. But those are the main conditions. But the brain can produce anxiety and depression when we're under stress, obviously. The brain can produce fatigue that can be severe and overwhelming. We see that all the time. The brain can produce eating disorders. The brain can produce, well, we can talk about long COVID as well, of course. So there's just so much. The fact is that the reason that my patients and your patients have these conditions is because they're human. They're just human. They have a brain, they have a body, they react to stress that occurs in life, and everybody has some of these. Everyone does. You know, when I like to say when I started my internship, I was a young doctor. I got diarrhea for 6 months. Well, was that diarrhea real? Well, it's real. You can see it. But it wasn't because I had something wrong in my bowel. If I can say this on here, I was scared shitless, of being a young doctor and making mistakes and hurting people. And I was just being human.
What's interesting about all those conditions that you've just listed is that almost without fail, I would say those are the conditions that we manage in medicine pretty poorly. I don't think that's controversial to say. I think patients know it. We as medical doctors know it. Those are the conditions where it's often, as I've already mentioned, quite frustrating because actually the tools with which we're trained, the tools that we learn at medical school just don't work that well. And this is, I guess, one of my biggest realizations as a doctor throughout my career has been how important the mind is in our lives, our physical health, our vitality, how much a role it plays. But we are literally taught zero about that at medical school. Now, that could also be because research was limited at the time when I was at med school, but I don't see much evidence of that changing at the moment. When I've spoken to a mutual friend of ours, Gabor Mate, in the past, and Gabor talks a lot about trauma and how still in many medical schools, the trauma word doesn't even come up at all in the entirety of medical education. And now that we know how much early life trauma affects our risk of autoimmune disease and all kinds of other conditions later on in life, it's baffling as to why it's taking this long for it to get into medical school training, because doctors are getting frustrated, patients are feeling underserved.
If you found this to be meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to support and encourage future creations of this kind. This content has been created with the sole intent of educating about, increasing awareness around, and deepening the understanding of the Mind-Body Syndrome, and more broadly speaking, the mind-body-spirit connection. To hear this clip in its full context, please visit the original media source. And to learn more about the mind-body-spirit connection, you can visit howtosayfupolitely.com. Until next time, love your struggle and remain free.